Welcome to our weekly CyberJA article reviews, where we discuss articles covering cybersecurity and GRC white papers, you name it, whatever it is in relation to cybersecurity and GRC. Then this is a place where we discuss all of these things, right? So let me quickly bring our article on screen so that we can have all of you up to date with all that is happening as we go along through our weekly review conversation. Right, guys? So, as usual, feel free to participate, ask questions so that we can make this as engaging for you as best as possible. As usual, the ultimate aim is for us as cybersecurity professionals to learn from each other to develop our skill set so that we can become better professionals within the industry. All right, so let me get our article on screen, guys. So good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. And for many of us who are accustomed to having Chris Carter, our cyber risk expert, he will be definitely joining us shortly during our conversation. All right, guys. So there we have our article for today for our discussion points. Now, for many of us in the cybersecurity space, we ultimately want to become cybersecurity leaders, cybersecurity expert, regardless of your role within the organization. We're always working towards becoming that leader within our field. And in many cases, specifically, for example, in my case, that ultimate dream is always working towards to become that chief information security officer. And the article that we are looking at today is one that is written by Justin Fimlade on the Dark Reading website, and it is entitled Rethinking Cybersecurity's Structure and the Role of the Modern CISO. So, what does that entails for us, right? So, there are a number of questions to ask, and then for sure, I would ask that you also, I will share the link for this article as well, so that you can definitely look at the details of this article and all that is that entail for us. All right. So in this article, a CISO with a focused role will be better prepared to thrive in an organization and accelerate adoption and understanding of cybersecurity. And based on this article's title, then it implies to me that there is now a difference between the modern CISO and the traditional CISO, as well as the title itself also begs the question of what is this cybersecurity's structure. So let's quickly get those understanding out of the way, then we can always go further into the article to see what it has entails. All right, so based on this article titled, it implies to me that, as was mentioned, there is a difference between the modern CISO and the traditional CISO for sure, right? So the modern CISO is what organizations of the future are looking for. So we definitely want to gain that understanding if it is that we desire to become the leaders of the future and the CISOs of the future. All right. Now, when we talk about the modern CISO, now there's a difference between the modern and the traditional in several ways. All right. So the traditional CISO, right? And hey, Chris, thanks for joining. Good timing. Good timing, my friend. Right.
Absolutely.
So at this point, we're definitely looking at, based on the article, looking at the differences between the modern CISO and the traditional CISO. So based on the article, there is a difference, and for sure, moving forward with organizations or persons who are looking to get into that space in becoming cybersecurity leaders, then that is what the future is looking for, right? So the traditional CISO was always seen as a technical expert responsible for securing the organization, systems, and networks. That is what we're accustomed to for traditional. However, with the increasing number and sophistication of cyber threats, the role has evolved to become more strategic and business focused. That is what is happening with today's CISOs. Therefore, the modern CISO is expected to have a deep understanding of the organization's business objectives as well as the ability to communicate the business. And many forums, many conversations, we hear this going on from time to time, right? That is where we are moving forward. The business impact of cybersecurity risk and investments to non-technical stakeholders. Therefore, if you want to become that modern CISO, then you definitely need to be able to develop a cybersecurity strategy that aligns with the organization's overall business strategy and goals. In addition to technical skills, the modern CISO must have strong leadership, communication, and collaboration skills to build relationships with other executives and departments within the organization, as well as with external stakeholders such as customers and partners. And the modern CISO must be able to take a proactive approach to cybersecurity, anticipating and preparing for future threats rather than just reaching to them as they arise. Right? So that is, as you look at the heading, rethinking the cybersecurity structure and the role of the modern CISO. So now that we have that clarity, then the next thing that pops out in this conversation is, what is this cybersecurity's structure? So there seems to be um, an established structure for cybersecurity that need to be revolutionized, right? So within the context of the article that we are looking at, cybersecurity's structure refers to the organizational framework and hierarchy within an organization that is responsible for managing and implementing cybersecurity policies and procedures, right? And this includes the roles and responsibilities of the CISO and your team, as well as the relationship and collaborations with other partners and stakeholders within the organization. And the article discusses how the traditional structure of cybersecurity, which often involves a separate and isolated cybersecurity team reporting to the CIO or CTO, may not be sufficient in today's business landscape, right? So instead, the article proposes a more modern and integrated structure where cybersecurity is viewed as a key business function, and the CISO has a seat at the executive table, collaborating with other executives to align cybersecurity with business objectives and goals, right? So just to lay the foundation and to get those out of the way as we look at the topic itself and to move further into our conversation in this article written by Justin Finland, right? So, Chris, would you like to give your take or just a quick overview before we start to explore all other details in relation to this article that we are looking at?
Sure, absolutely. And it's always great to be here, have this conversation about security and how it impacts how we live, work, and plan our future. So, first and foremost, before I start opining and pontificating around the role of the CISO, I want to make it very clear that I have never actually sat in a CISO, a physical CISO role. I have done some CISO work. Um, I also advise CISOs on a daily basis. So it's part of my job. I do have insights into how the CISO thinks, what are the things that keep them up at night, so to speak, and how they're planning and strategizing to integrate their remit into the overall larger business objectives and strategy. So yes, I completely agree with the article. I love the article and I read it. I was like, yes, yes, yes. Very few things I disagree with in the article. And the reason why is I think the CISO does play a very significant role inside of any organization. Why? Because of the digital transformation of businesses today. And you kind of hear this over and over with the advent of COVID, and that accelerated it. But it's really it is the reality we live in. And I think because the role of the CISO and security is such an immature part of the business that it sometimes fall under the CIO or under the COO or under the risk officer, where I think as the security as security matures, my bet is that the CISO will have the CIO reporting into him or her. Why? Because the CIO has one metric, and that is availability, right? That's pretty much keep things up and running. Where the CISO has, you really can't say what metrics they have, but you could say, okay, let's say it's around confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? Those are the three pillars. Anyone talk to you about security, that's what they're going to mention. Availability just happens to be one of those pillars. So I think as we mature and as we start to provide the value where we're not just security focused, but we're thinking about the larger business strategy, the overall business strategy, and how that is impacted by how secure your assets are. And the CISO is able to communicate effectively to the his or her peers. Then I think security will evolve into where it should be.
Exactly, sure. Now, looking at the article, a number of questions begin to come to mind in terms of the article itself. And it says that effective cybersecurity operations are as unique as the business models and technology choices of the companies they protect. Their creation and management are constantly complicated by a lack of common terminology and set of expectations, due mainly to the chaotic paths our industry has taken since its relatively recent rebirth. And you have actually touched on a number of those pointers already. Now, when you think about it, what are some of those strategies that the modern CISO, based on what this article is actually purporting that we need to move towards? What are some of those strategies that the modern CISO, if it is that we want to move into those roles, can use to build relationships with other executives and departments within the organization? Because I often get that feeling that there's this disconnect or alignment with those in senior management versus other person within the verticals within the organization.
Yes, I think the first thing a CISO has to do is understand the business, period, right? Why are we in business? What are the objectives and the goal of the business, right? And that could go by business unit, departments, or silos, but understanding that piece, right? That's the first piece. I think once you've understood the business, I think the next piece is how do you effectively engage with those business unit leaders, right? That in such a way that you're able to have a positive impact on security when it comes to investment or projects or what any initiatives they have going. And then, right, so part of that collaboration is going to involve communicating. How do you effectively communicate? So if you're talking about risk, do not pull out the MITRE attack, heat map. Uh, Probably start at a very high level and talk about how putting in certain security measures is going to either accelerate profits or minimize the risk, right? I think if we're on that level, we're speaking the language of business. But if we're talking about the techniques and procedures used by an APT in China because of the latest CVE, and we download it from, those are things that no one cares, right? Go home and come back when you're ready to speak to me in a language where I'm able to understand. And I think so. Once we have the communication piece going, I think also creating a cybersecurity aware culture, right? Are you security aware? How do you embed security into the psyche of not just the leadership, but the folks across the business? Have business ambassadors, have folks who are uh, have a good understanding of why security matters. And I think those are the key, and from my perspective, those are the key ingredients. And then, of course, taking feedback, right? Being the approachable one who is willing to take feedback, give feedback, and again, around communicating such that the business sees you as a partner or an enabler, not necessarily a roadblock.
Sure. Very importantly there. And as we look further into the article itself, um, very importantly is the fact that it goes on to say that the the relative immaturity of the cybersecurity function leaves insufficient organizational precedent for titles and hierarchy. Some organizations default to practicality, however, runs IT or the help desk becomes be the security leader. Others are interested in hiring a CISO who will manage the details of security that are unfamiliar to all other business leaders. Neither of these approaches are healthy, and the popular narrative around security is dominated by images of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And the question is that, in light of all these things, how many persons still want to move into these roles of becoming those cybersecurity leaders based on these demands? Now, we are led to believe security is terrible, that breaches are inevitable, or that the right leader can render the organizations in invulnerable. And this kind of absolutism usually comes from those new to the space who aren't yet well versed in security. It's pervasive, it's incorrect, and it breeds insecurity for both the organization and individual. Now, in light of this, now how does a CISO deal with all of these challenges, right? And yes, go ahead, Chris.
No, I think you have to prioritize, and again, boiling it down to its simplest, and not being simplistic or not oversimplifying, but boiling critical points down to um, the simplest way of communicating. Right, the business has to understand that um, security in a way is it's a part of everyday life, right? So you have a security initiative. It's an analogy that I would use is, you have a need to get in your car and drive to the airport or go to the grocery store or drop your kids off at school. Whatever you need to do, that thing that you're going to do comes with risk. So as an individual, uh when you go in your car, the first thing you do is you put your seatbelt on, right? Uh, and prior to that, your insurance is updated. So you purchased insurance. So you're now transferring the risk. If anything were to happen, you're going to share that risk. The insurance company is going to cover the cost and make you whole. Security, in many ways, is similar, right? That is similar to anything. All those measures are risk mitigation controls that you've put in place as an individual, just as the business has to put risk mitigation controls in place. in order for the business to operate effectively and profitably. So I
Exactly.
think the challenge with the CISO is, how do you prioritize the goals of these departments, right? And how do you bring around cybersecurity awareness, ensuring that the business understands the risk that they're taking, and how do they effectively communicate that risk and partner with the business or sell the business on the idea on a risk mitigation strategy, whether it's encryption, if it's pen test exercises or tabletop exercises, or putting in a new SIM tool, whatever that thing is, whatever you're going to put in place, the business has to be on board and understands. In some cases, they don't have to understand, but you have to effectively communicate in order to reduce the dissonance in the business minds and the reluctance, right, in terms of the CISO effectively adopting new cybersecurity measures.
Sure. And one of our viewers is saying that I think the fear factor arises from communication errors and building cybersecurity cultures that are disconnected, right? It's a very important point that you have actually made mention of. So, in light of all of this, based on what is mentioned in the article, right? Stress 60% and burnout 53% were the largest personal risks CISOs faced. So, the burden of cybersecurity is something that is real for us to recognize that as security leaders, then this is something that is, you need a lot of support. You have to know how to really build a relationship within the organizations to get that level of support that is required for you to execute your task effectively. And he also provided a number of ways in terms of how does a CISO deal with all of these stress. And he provides an advice saying that a guide to creating supporters, champions, and realistic expectations, right? He proposed that you set expectations that you want, right? The difference between successful leaders and those who burn out is communicating the realities of cybersecurity from current measures to potential future states, right? That is one of the things that he recommends. And secondly, to be a business executive first, cyber expert second. Chris, do you want to um, share any insights on that?
No, again, it's kind of saying the same thing, over and over, and hopefully the audience understands that, because the effective communication, what that does is it sets expectations, and you take enough. I work in many different settings, and one of the things I've always told, as a board member, what I've told my CEO is, you have to bring the board along, right? Regardless of what you're doing, bring the board along. And what does that mean? So you effectively communicate what you're doing, get the board to sign off on it, right? Once the board signs off on it, you have to say, hey, remember the last meeting? We talked about this. You approved it. Now here's where we are. We're at mile 2 or kilometer, 5 of this 100-kilometer journey. We're not going to get there tomorrow. However, there are bumps in the road ahead. And here's how I will manage those bumps in the road. We have speed limits, we have bumpers, we have things, right? We have to stop and get gas, or we have to stop and charge the car, right? So we're not going to get there as quickly as we'd like to, but we're going to get there safely, and we have a plan, right? And we have a contingency plan if a plan B, so to speak. So I think, the effective communication of the CISO, right? Speaking in a language that is not technical, but one that is business, right? That's one. The second point is, being able to tell stories using real world examples, analogies, right? The third is, I think, demonstrating, you know, the financial and the reputational risks associated with cybersecurity breaches or things that will or could happen. The fourth thing is aligning cybersecurity risk and investment with the organization's overall business strategies and goals. I'll say this until I'm blue in the face, but that is critical. And I think fifth and final, I would say, provide clear and concise reports. Again, where you approved a 100-mile journey. We're at our, 180-kilometer journey. We're at kilometer 5 of this journey. Here's what it's going to take. This is where we were. Here's where we are. This is what's ahead. And by the way, if this comes up, here's how we're going to manage it. Again, that effective communication saves a lot of dissonance, a lot of consternation, a lot of questioning from your board or your leadership, right? Effective communication sets expectation, reduces the risk associated with ineffective communication. So there
Sure,
you have it.
definitely. Very valuable points there. And also, we have another important point coming in is that although the CISO is a gatekeeper, they will have to establish a buying structure where the team sees value in the approach. Another factor is that the CISO roadmap for cybersecurity has to be holistic. Many organizations do not have a contingency, right? And that's also a very important point, something that we have actually discussed on many occasions. All right, so there you have it, guys. Another weekly review in our series of weekly review articles, and we have just looked at rethinking cybersecurity structure and the role of the modern CISO. So if it is that you're aspiring to be a cybersecurity leader, then for sure you want to take these things into consideration. Moving from beyond the traditional of just thinking about technical things to moving to that point of business alignment, building that business relationship within organizations. So until then, we see you next week for another interesting review.
Have a great week, guys. Looking forward to next week.
Bye, guys. Thanks again, Chris.
Bye bye. Cheers.